I'm supposed to feel something. Instead, I feel literally nothing other than maybe some vague anger. But not towards that plot line, because that plot line, it's just a thing that happened. It's not even... The anger is towards everything else. That's just there. They said, well, we have characters, and the characters need to have events occur to them, so let's just insert events. And then when the events happen, they have to say lines of dialogue, so just have somebody write the dialogue. Because... And it doesn't matter if the dialogue makes sense or relates to anything. It's just, as long as there's words coming out of their mouth, it's like a story. It's like we wrote a story. The writers of Halo 5 put in their first draft, and when they were asked how they felt about it, they said, it's like we wrote a real story. We didn't, but it's like we did. And that's almost as good. No, Smithy, it's explicitly stated that Cortana is now in the physical world. She wasn't a she's not... She's maybe a hologram, but she's also real now. It's completely unclear, but it's heavily implied that she is now somewhat physical now. Like that cutscene where she shows up for the first time and stops the warden from killing Chief and puts Chief at the cryptum. Like, she's there. It's like, it's... The whole thing with the gateway to the domain in Genesis is that it's the gateway between the physical and the domain. And she was in the domain, and then she came out into the real world. That's the proper response to what I just told you. That is also the canonical explanation as far as I understand it. Like, they literally did that stupid thing you mentioned. They did it. God, this game is bad. Like, it's it's consistently bad. It's strange. Because, like, most games, like, Halo 4 is very inconsistent. It has some good parts and it has some really bad parts. But this game is consistently bottom of the barrel. Like, every single mission has something awful about it. There are, like, 2 cutscenes that aren't the worst things ever. And even those are just, like, introduction cutscenes where it's like, hey, look at these characters. That's the thing. The plot isn't nonsense. The plot is extremely functionally, clichédly fine in its own sense. It's only when you insert it into the Halo fiction as a whole that it completely breaks down. Because nothing in this game fits with anything in any of the previous game. Smithy, the anger is because if you followed the series and the marketing and all of the extended universe stuff, there is an incredibly compelling story that could have been told here that they bypassed in order to retell Mass Effect 3 with like a quarter of the writing talent of Mass Effect 3. Again, and a quarter may be generous. It may be closer to like an eighth or a tenth of the writing talent. A fan sequel would be so much better. A fan sequel would be from somebody who probably read the books and was like, oh, hey, let's try to like tie this stuff in an interesting way, because there's some really compelling things in the books that would make for a really cool story if done properly. This is written by somebody who never read the books, or who read the Wikipedia, not even the Halopedia article. They read the Wikipedia plot summary. And then they just said, I don't know, let's just take like 3 points of this plot summary and just put them in the game, and they'll just be mentioned. But we won't actually like dive into them or explain them or tie them into the greater story. It's just a character's going to say something, and then we're going to move on. Because we don't need to have a cohesive interfictional narrative that goes across all of the different Halo things that have come out over the last 2 decades. Why would we want that? It's like the plot is boring and cliche. The storytelling is nonsensical. The pacing's bad. The writing is just has no tie into anything, and it shits all over the Halo fiction as a whole. And it does it in a way, it's not even like, oh, this is the bad one and then the next one will come back and be good. The things that happen in this game completely overwrite anything that could have happened, and like we can't go back. There's no, short of saying Halo 5 is non-canon, you can't undo the things that were done here, because it completely alters the state of the galaxy and the nature of individual characters. Like, Cortana coming back should be a big momentous occasion that is like fun, or if she's a villain, it should be tied into the, like, you can't do Cortana coming back again unless like maybe in Halo 6 you'll kill her, and then in Halo 7 you'll bring her back again, and this time she's a good guy, but that'll still be like, you can't fix that. Like, you can't do another story about the mantle of responsibility, which is a really, really big, important thing. But in here, they just completely changed what it means and what it is. You can't bring back the domain again, because this game just breaks what the domain is and where it came from and what its purpose is. The Didact isn't even meant, or I think he's mentioned once offhandedly in this entire game. He was the main villain of the prior game, and he survived. So he's just not here for some reason. The librarian is mentioned once, and it's a lie what is said about her. So she's, I guess, not important. The Flood are literally not mentioned at all, despite being the main antagonist of the first 3 games. The Precursors are getting one offhand mention in an audio log that is not even relevant to what they actually were. Oni is like, there's a couple offhanded comments about how Oni's bad, but that doesn't actually tie in at all, even though Oni are like the worst people ever. And like, you can't tell a story, but like, the whole thing this was setting up for was humanity is fucked up, and they're doing some real fucked up stuff now that they've won the war, and it's kind of like betraying the fact that they should be taking responsibility for the galaxy now that they're in a position of power. And they're not, which is the same thing the Forerunners did, and it's the same reason the Forerunners fell to the Flood. That is the core of where this story could go. And everything from before Halo 4 to this game coming out set up for that. It was like a, I mean, there were side tangents, but the main thrust of every story that came out pushed it towards that direction. And this game is just like a complete right turn. And you can't detour your way back, because you can't tell a story about humanity being in power over the galaxy when humanity just lost the galaxy to a bunch of random crazy AIs. So you can't fix that. It's just over. Like, the Halo fiction is just over now. Because you're going to have a game where, oh, the AIs are here, and now we need to fight a rebellion against the AIs, and where humanity's back in a position of like, oh no, we're the underdogs again. Even though we just had 3, 4, 5 games that were humanity's the underdogs. Like, what, are you going to bring the Flood back in the next one? How are you going to bring the Flood back? It's going to be, unless they try to pull a, oh, well, Cortana was actually corrupted by the Flood or by the Precursors, which I would not be surprised if they try to pull that, but there is so little setup, and nothing she does in this game works with that premise, that it can't possibly, I refuse to believe that's going to be what they try to do. Or if they do try to do it, I refuse to believe that there's any possibility to be anything other than terrible. Yay. It's over.